Hi guys, good morning. My first live video is on its way, and in another 4 minutes time we will start our live video. Hi, good morning to all. Thank you. Hope you guys are joining one by one, and then this is a live session that I want to take for all of our friends, and then who are my students in the earlier part of my life, and then those who are current students also are there available for me. In our today's YouTube channel live session, I'm going to talk about Power Pivot and Power Query here. Again, when I started working with this particular session, I got a survey point. I took around 60 votes totally, and then 40 of them have responded to me in the voting session here. And this is what the data set that I got. So many want to learn about a Power Query and Power Pivot a lot. And then once the number of line items or number of participants are joining here who also showed a lot of interest on formulas and functions, and as well as pivot table in Excel, and the lookups is following with it. In our today's logic, we will talk about the elementary or the introduction part of Power Query and Power Pivot. I'm planning to at least add 2 or 3 different videos every week once. I'm planning to keep a lot of live sessions sooner or later. I'll come back with that. And before I start going into the program, so I would like to thank a few of the people who are there available for me. And the first one that I want to thank here is Mr. Karthik. Actually, Karthik is the one who always pushed me to do a lot of things here. And then whatever I am or whoever I am today, after the COVID component, and once I have the privilege of being with him, and he's the one who pushed me to the limits. And then if I'm an Microsoft certified trainer today, it is because of him. I should thank him first. And the next one who I should thank next is my friend, another friend who always talks about doing a YouTube video with a face on it. Because the biggest thing that she always says to me that don't give your voiceover, because people will not be feeling interactive there. So it's better, please do come alive and then add a video to it. And then she always gave me a setup of a studio to work around. Thanks, Evie, to do that. And let's jump into what we're going to learn today. So I don't want to take too much of time on thanking all, and then let's see how we're going to use Power Query and Power Pivot betterly. When you go for Power Query and Power Pivot, what is Power Query and what is Power Pivot? This is my first Excel Live 365 session 1, and then I'm gonna give 4 more session in the next 4 to 6 weeks here. So the next session will be on formulas and functions. Subsequently, we'll see what is a pivot table and how to work with lookup. When I go for Power Query and Power Pivot, it has a big history in it, and many of them don't even know that Power Pivot and Power Query are available for a very long time. I will anyway add this particular PowerPoint presentation for us in our description link, so you can click the link and download all the files that we are about to deal with. I'm going to show you a small example where we can use a Power Query to combine the data, and where to use the Power Query to clean and cleanse the data, or I will call it as ETL. In a data analytical world, we call it as extract, transform, and load. When we come back to the Power Query history, so Power Query history is way back in 2010 version, and then we have in 2013 version. Again, at that time, Power Query is not a part of our menu. It was a part of a query here, or we can add it as an add-on here. So you cannot have this as a normal menu here, or it will not be your menu path or a ribbon here, like our home or insert tab. It is an additional menu that we need to add. In 2016 version and 19 version and so on, this has become a part of our data. Probably if you see Office 2016, 1808 version and above, probably you will see this particular menu in our data tab, where you will see get and transform data and query data here. And this is there available in 2016 also. And then there are a few components which is removed from our data catalog. And then when you come back to Power Query and Power Pivot, so you have to learn a few more links which allows us to work with Power Query. So if you are adding, or if you're using Office 2013 version, then you can click the download Power Query add-in links, which allows you to add an add-in point, or else it will be a default menu in your data set. You can also use Power Query in Mac, plus you can also use them in Excel online version too. Again, if you want to do that, you can either go by a .NET framework here, so you have to have an updated .NET framework here, plus you can also use that as a web view here. So let's see what a Power Query will do. This is the history of Power Query. When I go to Power Query allows you to do the following list. So it can allow you to import data from different external data sources. It allows you to shape the data for you. Shaping data can be removing unwanted columns or changing the data type if the data type is wrongly representing here, or you can even append and merge table together. Once you clean and cleanse the data using the Power Query Editor, then you can add that to the Excel and start creating the pivot charts and reports. And the biggest plus point when we are using a Power Query Editor is it can periodically refresh it. If the data is growing data, if the data is adding every now and then you don't want to recreate the entire Power Windows or Power Query window or the data consolidation every time. Instead, you can just go ahead with the data set directly here. So let's see how we're going to use this data a better one. And when I go for Power Query Editor, the Power Query Editor goes by multiple phases here. When you go to Power Query, you will face 4 different dimensions. So these are the dimensions that we will call it as ETL. Again, when I come back to the ETL process, probably our data set will give us the data part better now. In the 4 phase of our Power Query Editor, we will see connect, transform, combine, and load. The biggest issue that we had earlier was we cannot able to bring the data into one place. Now using the Power Query Editor, you can connect multiple data sources either from the system that you locally have, or you can bring it from your hard disk or your any attached drives here, or you can bring the data even from OneDrive or any of the cloud transformation that you can do here. And once you get the data connected to the data set, then you can transform the data and shape the data according to your need. And if you are bringing the data from multiple sheets or multiple workbooks, then you can combine them all. Once you have clean and cleansed the data, then the data set will automatically be loaded here. And then once we are working on the loading component, that makes our life a little more easier. So how do you first of all connect the data? When I go for the connecting data, again, Power Query Editor and Power Pivot windows are available for all the Excel users who have Office 2016, 2019, 2021, Office 365, 2013, and so on and so forth. Because earlier we had Power Pivot and Power Query only for professional edition. Now we don't have that. We can use Power Query and Power Pivot for any users, whether you are a home user or a student edition, or you are using a professional edition or even enterprise edition. Everyone can use a Power Query and Power Pivot. If you are downloading a data set into a Power Query and Power Pivot, then when you go to the data tab and then click the get data tab, then you will get the drop down like this. Probably I'll show you how it's going to work for you in our real world scenario. I'll just give you a small idea, but Power Query allows you to connect the data not just from a flat file but also from a database, and even a web source data sets and cloud services can be added. Plus the Power BI data set, now it has been improved as Power Platform. I'll show you that in a while now. This is how we connect the data from other sources or the sources from the data list here. And once we connect the data set, and if you want to make a change in your data, you are ready to do it. And normally when you get a data set, you will get all the data set in a list. If you're looking for only certain column of data to be transformed and kept in place, then you can retain that by choosing what column that you want, what column that you don't want. You can add and remove the rows and columns here however way you want it to be. The next logic is combining data. If I'm bringing in the data from multiple tables, if you want to have data to be appended, then you can do appending in 2 different dimensions. When I say appending a data, you are adding multiple sheets one below the other one as a rows here will be called as append. And when you go to merge, you can add an additional column to a list. Probably you can see the small uh, an image which shows you what is an append and what is your merge is here. When you're appending on merging, the advantage that we have is in the merge part, you generally do it in this existing file. You do the other way around. When you go to append, you can either go for an intermediate append or inline append. An intermediary append is something which you create a new file based on the files that you already have with you. An inline append will allow you to add the file in the existing data set itself. This is how we combine our data in Power Query. And finally, once we have done everything, we will close and load the data. Again, there will be a subtle variant will be there. When I say close and load, it has a different variety or different use case scenario in it. And if you are using close and load 2, then the dataset will become a little different here. So this is how we normally use the Power Query editor. So let's jump into the other list, and these are the dataset which allows you to support the data. And if you want to know more about what are the new update that we are going to get in Power Query editor, you can use the clicks or the links below here. So the one which is called the roadmap, the next one is called what's new in Excel. So we just had a small idea about the Power Queries here and what we can do with the Power Query here. If you have any queries here, if you want to give a chat box part about it, you can let me know. I can give you a chat box information on the data sets here, or else I'll go back to the new data set and show you how we're going to use Power Query in a data set in a normal dimension, where when the data sets are clean and clear. And if the data sets are not clean and clear, how do we use the data better? We'll see all of them. So let's jump into the simple logic of Power Query here. So how the Power Query will come and where the Power Query will be. So I'm going to go back to our Excel sheet here. I'm going to take up a blank Excel sheet here. And in the blank Excel sheet, we are about to see how and where we can add our Power Query and Power Pivot. So when I go back to our blank data set, and I'm using the latest version in Office 365, I'll go to File. When you go to Account, you can see that it shows that I'm using Office 365 app for enterprises. So you can choose your own options, or if you're using Office 2013, 16, 19, 21, 365, don't worry about it. Everywhere you will have Power Query and Power Pivot. And when I go back to my data set, now I can see the two important part of our Power Query. One is called get and transform data. Another one is queries and connections here. My first agenda is this is the data that I have with me for our learning, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to combine them. There is a text file that I have here with me, and this is the text file that I have here. Again, when you work with Power Editor, if you want to combine and contrast the data, or if you want to combine the data and make sure the data set works properly, see to that all your data sets are coming in the same pattern here. The dimension of the data cannot be different here. It has to be one and the same. So use the data perfectly. So if you closely watch, I have 2014 sales with me, 2015 sales with me, and 2016 sales with me. All three sales are coming in the same pattern. The only thing is the data are varying here a bit. The numbers are different here, but the rest of the pattern or the dimension of the data set are same here. So now I'm going to go and add the data set as a folder here. Let's see how to do that. Let me minimize this, and I'll go back to our Excel file, and then I'll come back to my data and get data, and I'm going to bring in a flat file here. So I'm going to use the first option called from file, and I'll say from folder here. And when I showed you the PPT earlier, you can see differences when it comes to the data set. So when I chose the data earlier, data was a little different from what I have showed here. So when I come back here, you can see the data differently. Let me just make our PPT simultaneously available for us. By that way, I can showcase both the data set better. Let me just make a new window here, and then I will just come back here and then pick up the files here. And then let me just showcase this simultaneously. So this will be the differences when we are working with the data sets here. So when I come back to the data in our list, so you'll see a different file here. So it's a files, another dimension. Let me just copy this and then add that here so that I can showcase the differences, different dimensions here. So you can see that the data are different here. So when I come back to my latest version, I'm not seeing the Power BI data set. Instead, I'm seeing a Power Platform here. You can bring the data verse, data flow, another dimension. So we're not going to go for all these dimensions in a detailed point on the first live sessions here. We will see that in a much more detailed dimension as we go forward for the subsequent live sessions for us. In our today's live session, I'm going to just combine the data using a folder here. So I just showed you the data that I'm about to bring into the data sets. And this is the data that I'm going to bring into our list. And then we will build a report out of it. So I'll come back to the get data from file and from folder here. That will take a few moments to kickstart our .NET framework here. Once the data kickstarts the .NET framework, I'll ask you a question where your data set lies here. So I'm going to go back to my desktop and then pick up the folder called YouTube live videos, and then I'm going to select the folder that I'm going to use here. When I do that, automatically it's going to showcase all the three files here. I am bringing in a text file in our list. Text file can be directly combined here. I don't want to use the Power Query editor window to do it. You can see that there is a combine file that comes into play. You can combine and transform the data, or combine and load, or combine and load too. I'm going to use all these functionality in a different way, not using the combine button. Instead, I'm going to use a transform data button here. When I come back to the transform data button, you will end up in reaching to the Power Query editor window, and you will see all the three files that we have here. Again, now I can see the name of the file. I'm not seeing the content of the file here. If you want to extract this content, you can do it. But when I extract it, I will remove all the unwanted fields that I have here, because I have a lot of data sets here, folder path, attributes, when I create this data, what is the extension of the data, and so on and so forth. If you're using a folder option to bring the data into the list, so please see to that your extensions are all coming in one dimension. By that way, you can use the data set better. So once the data sets are all in the single dimension, then I'm going to retain where I can extract the data further. I'm going to remove all the other dimension. If you want to keep two columns here, choose what the two columns that you want to retain. You can remove the other column by giving a right click here and remove the other columns here. By that way, I know exactly what are the fields that I'm going to extract, which file the extracted fields is coming from. Now I'm going to use either the double arrow that is available here, or I can use the one which is above, because now it's not available for me because I have chose two columns here. When I deselect one of the columns here, automatically my combine file will come into play. When I click the combine file, now the data is going to append the data as one below the other one. But before it appends the data, it's going to showcase the first file for me as a preview here. When I give an OK, that's going to extract the entire data set for me in my list here. So now the data sets are going to evaluate my query and then load them one below the other one. I have a data from 2014 to 2016 here. When you scroll down the data set, you can see all these 3 years are coming up here. Now I have a query that comes into play. Do I have to use a Power Query or a Power Pivot in my data set here? So if you are having that as your doubt, then what you can do is you can build a data based on the Power Queries here. So let me just go back to another window in Excel. So now I'm going to just say close and load to. That's going to add the data to my Excel sheet and tell you or ask me a question. Would you like to add them in the same sheet, or would you like to add them in a new sheet? So the close and load will allow you to do this. Again, there is one catch when we are working in a Power Pivot or Power Query window, that is you cannot reverse what you're doing. So if you are doing something, if you're stopping in between, you have to stop it completely and start from the scratch again. This is the only thing that I feel that as a glitch here. Other than that, the Power Query editor will be a super software or super add-on that we have in Excel, which allows us to save a lot of time for us. So let me just add this data set directly in the same pattern. So I'm going to put them in the existing sheet, and I'm going to change the sheet to start from C1 here. and then I'm going to give an OK. That's going to add my table to my dataset here. So now my datasets are very small, so I can use a Power Query here. If my datasets are bigger, then I won't use the Power Query here. So I will go for a different logic, which is called Power Pivot. When you're working on the dataset, so when you're trying to consolidate data from a single sheet or a multiple sheet, then I will always use either a Power Query or a Power Pivot. A consolidation of data can be done in two different dimensions. Again, when I do that, I need to understand that whether my data sets are working properly or not, or whether I am able to add a lot of data in one simple logics. If you're using Power Query will allow you to go to the maximum extent an Excel can hold here. For example, if you see the maximum capacity of an Excel sheet is 10,48,76 rows and 16,384 columns. That is the length and width of a sheet in Excel. So you can add data as much as you can until the data sets capacity here. The maximum capacity of a sheet can be used in a Power Query editor. If you are using a Power Pivot, then the data goes beyond our Excel capacity and we can move the data to a data model here. When it comes to a data model, then I don't want to worry about the number of rows here, but I want to now worry about the size of the file. If the size of the file goes until 250 MB, the system will not have any issues. We can use that data very effectively here. So that's what a Power Pivot and a Power Query can do. And I've already created a small class. I just took one class for Mr. JR here. And for JR, when I took this class, I just started building the data one by one. So I added the data, and then I created a report out of it. And then I added a data, another data, which is a little longer data. Then I created a report out of it. And then finally, I've added a data, and then I created a report out of it. Again, this is a text file that I used in whatever I'm showing you right now, whatever I'm going to do right now. And the next one is a CSV file. The subsequent one will be an Excel to Excel file. There will be a subtle variant when we are bringing in an Excel file into an Excel using a Power Query editor here. So let's see how to do that. So I just showcase this data set. We are going to work on our new data set. So close this data. And now I got the list and I can create a report out of it. And I'm going to go back to my insert and add a pivot table. And then I can create a brand new sheet here and then start creating the report. I'm interested in the yearly sales here. So I'm going to remove all our data set out of the equation and then add the yearly sales alone. If you are new to pivot table, then we will learn about pivot table basically in our next live video. And I'll go back to the design and report layout and show in tabular form. And then I will just add a value field settings to my sales with the currency symbol to it. Now I got the data set, and then when I add an Alt F1, that's going to give me my chart here. Then I can sit and clean and cleanse the chart also with a header on top. I'll just say yearly sales here, and then I'll rename the headers here to the yearly sales here. And if I want to add the data set better, then I'll go back to my home and then add a data label here. And then now I got the data labels are coming up here perfectly. The advantage of keeping a Power Query in place here is I don't want to recreate if there is a new data addition has to be added here. For example, now I have 2014, 2015, and 2016's sales here. Now I have 2 more years of sales that is added to my list, or I have data sets until 2023. I want to see all the data sets here. I can do that also. I don't want to recreate the entire thing that I did right now. Instead, I can just minimize this data and then I'll go back to the data set where my folder was being used earlier. So now I have this data set. If I have the other data set with me, I can add them all to here. I already have this data with me. So let me just go back to my data and then I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. So now I pick up the data that I have here and then I'm going to select all the other years, copy it, and then come back to our folder and then paste it here. and all my data sets are added in my list. Once I get the data set added here, then I don't do anything very big. Just come and then give a right click and then refresh my table field here. That will refresh the entire data set for me. I think the data set takes a little longer because I think that I've saved it. Yes, just a minute, because I'm doing it in OneDrive here. Probably my data set will take a little longer than normal. So I'm sorry about that. I just have to give a right click here and then go and refresh the table here. That's going to refresh and then add my other years into the list here. Once my table is updated, then my pivot table can be updated easily, including my charts here. But when I do that, I am cramping the data set a lot here. So how do I adjust this cramping of data set display here? I'll come back to my pivot table chart on the left hand side where the format axis will be there. I'll give a right click there. I'll go to format axis and then change the display unit to millions here. And that way my additional zeros will go off. If I put them in thousands, then probably that's going to give you the data sets even more better. I'll just make them a little bigger. So now I'll see all my data set is added automatically here. So this is how we can add a normal sheet, and then this is how we can add the data set in a report for us. This is my data for text files, and then this is my charts in here. So now I got the entire list coming up here. So this is how we can import a data from a text file using Power Query here. You can also use a CSV file to do that. So let me show you how I'm going to use a CSV file to work on. Or if you're looking forward for a Power Query editor where we're going to clean and cleanse the data, we can also do that. So again, I'm going to take one simple Excel sheet here, which allows us to do things better. And then I'll take a blank data set here. Now I'm going to improve our data better here. The next logic that I'm about to take right now is on the population data. Again, this is the data that I always use when I train people on Power BI desktop. But I'm going to take only one data here. This is the data that I'm interested in bringing in. And then I'm going to clean and cleanse this data and then create a report out of it. So now you can see that the data set has not properly coming up here. And then I'm going to use a small PDF here, which allows us to understand what we are about to build out of this data. So this is one of my Power Query screens here. This is what we are about to build right now. So my data set is this. This is the data set that I have with me. And I'm going to create a report based on a PDF given to me. And this is where we will use a Power Query for cleaning and cleansing the data. So I'm going to use only a few data here because if you see, I have around 9 columns of data. But whereas when I go back to my PDF, it shows only 6 column, and the entire terms are varying here because my first column says something else here. Wherein when I come back to my project, which I want to build right now, it gives you a different data set altogether. So how do I use this data? How I'm going to use this data better right now? So for this, what I will do is normally you can add this data in a blank Excel sheet, or you can launch a Power Query editor from a blank Excel workbook, and from there on you can do it. There are two different ways we can do it. I showed you earlier to use the data tab, which allows us to get the data from a file and then start working on it. Instead of that, I'm going to use a different dimension right now. So let me take a brand new Excel file. I'm pressing a Control N here. Then I'm going to come back to my data, and then I'll go back to the get data, and I'll say launch Power Query editor. This is going to launch my Power Query directly, and then from there on I can load the data, clean and cleanse the data, and then bring the data from Power Query editor to Excel sheet and create a report out of it. So once I do this, and this will be a little different from a Power BI desktop because Power BI desktop shows certain fields differently. and Excel will show a certain field differently here. When I come back to the Power Query editor in an Excel, so if I want to open a blank Power Query editor, I can just go back to the data and launch the Power Query editor here. But when I once I do that, this is where I need to clean and cleanse the data. But for that, I need to load the data here. That's where I'll start the first logic of our entire cleaning process called enter data or extract data. So I have a data set called enter here, and I click that. That's going to tell you which data that you're going to import right now. So I can manually punch the data if I wanted to here. So you can see that there is a punching of data possible here. If you don't want to enter, you already have the data in another sheet, then you can go to the new source here, and then you can build the data or bring the data from the following list here. You can either go by the flat files here, or you can go by database, you can go by Power Platform, you can go by Azure, you can go by other online services, and other sources also are available for us. I'm interested in doing a flat file here, so I'm going to go back to my file, and then I'm going to bring only one file here, not a bunch of files here. So I'm going to use text and CSV here. When I do that, automatically ask you a question where the data lies. I'll go back to my desktop, and then I'll go back to my YouTube folder, and then I'll select the first file alone and import it. Once I import the data, it's going to take a while because I'm having 100,000 line items here, and then the data set is gonna showcase the data as a preview for me. I'm not able to see all the data set because it's going to show only a 200 first rows here, which will allow you to tell whether the data sets are coming correctly or not. And when I give an OK, that's going to populate the data here completely, and then it's going to come with a lot of bugs in it. Now I want to clean and cleanse the data. If the data sets are not coming properly here, so you can start the cleaning and cleansing from removing rows and columns first. So I'm going to remove the row first. I don't need the first row called column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. To do that, as I am bringing the data into a Power Query editor, we are moving the data from an Excel sheet to a data model. We no longer have a cell references here. We will either pick up everything as a column, or we will pick up everything as a row here. So I'm going to use the rows and columns to work around with the data. So I'll go back to my data set, and then I'll click the remove row here. That gives you a drop down, and you have a lot of options here. I'm interested only in the top row removal here. So I'll go back to the remove top rows here. And once I get the top rows here, I'm going to just say remove the first data set and then give an OK there. By that way, it removes the list. But still, my data sets are not proper here. And I want to make one more dimension in my data sets here. I want to just go back to my Power Query settings here. So I'll go back to my properties and then see how the data looks. And this is the data that I have here. And let me just add a Power Query window here because I want to see that when I do the list here. So I'll come back to the home tab. Now I want to move the first row of my data set to the heading here. To do that, I'll come back to my home tab, and then I will just click the line called use the first row as header. When I click that, that's going to automatically add the list. I in between added the data into our list here, where we can see the data set work better for us.